Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So today, I wanted to talk about something really cool. We've been doing some more testing on the infinite burr rune stuff, and I know, some of you guys are like, "Oh, it's cheating! Oh, you cheater! Oh, you cheater! Oh, you're such a cheater!" Yeah, okay, all right, but listen up. It wasn't really about the burr runes to begin with. It was about manipulating the RNG system into dropping us what we wanted. And what we found out is since then has actually been even more crazy. If you haven't checked out the video on me finding infinite burr runes, you should probably check that out first, and then come back to this one because this is more of like advanced class on a lot of this stuff, and it has to do with testing individual variables past what falls. So we actually did some testing, and we came up with even more stuff. Let me close some of this stuff real quick because I've got so many dojinks open. I need that one open. And we don't need this one open. Alright, so this is the one we're looking for. Alright, so one of the things that we found out, and this was in the last couple episodes, is that we found out there were some specific variables to causing the chests to drop their loot. And what we think the main variable is, so the main, let's say the main variable, seems to be chunk loading. I'm not exactly sure how to explain that unless you've ever seen like Minecraft chunks. Minecraft chunks is basically where the game loads individual chunks, and as it loads individual chunks, there's actually some people out there who have done like playthroughs where, like it's like I lived Minecraft on this one chunk or something, like Minecraft one chunk challenge. Here we go. Here's some good images of what a chunk looks like. So this is some people who have done these like one chunk challenges, and basically in Diablo 2, it's very similar. So this is what represents one chunk in the Minecraft world, and as you can see, he has a little house and a little farm, and like that's about an entire chunk right there. And as you can see, like the pyramid is like an entire chunk. And in Diablo 2, I don't know the exact size of the chunk, so don't so forgive me for that. But basically, it seems like the chunk loading itself seems to be directly related to the variables on what drops from the chest. So when you load a chunk of any type, and I can demonstrate this for you. There's no reason for me to just tell you like this is a lecture class. I can actually have some real demonstrations. So if we load in a chunk, which is right now we're loading in Kurast, which is a fairly simple thing, and then we're going to load in lower Kurast, which loads in this chunk here, and we're going to teleport directly to the super chest, and we're going to get a small charm. Now, the small charm is going to be +1 strength, and I can guarantee you that it will be +1 strength every single time due to some additional rules that we've encountered as well that seem to be separate from the chunk rules. So the main variable seems to be chunk loading, and then a secondary set of rules determines what stats actually roll on the item, which is rather interesting. But let's go ahead and change the variable real quick. So we're going to change the variable from the small charm so I can show you that just simply changing the variable changes the item. And I'm going to do this by loading in a chunk. And the easiest way to load in chunks in this game without loading in anything else is to load in something like a waypoint. Because now you have loaded in this chunk, you're not moving around, you're not loading in anything else. And then you go there, and then you teleport over, and you're going to see that you're going to get bramble mints and a lance. And this happens every single time. And you can reproduce this every single time. You can change the number of chunks that are loaded, and you can kind of control this through the waypoints by essentially loading in one waypoint and then loading in another waypoint, and you can basically very technically load in specific chunks. Now you might be asking, well, do specific chunks have different variables? Well, yes, they do. So if I load in Kurast Bazaar first, and then I load in Lower Kurast, I will change the chunk, and it will get a small crescent and a maiden spear, and I can repeat this over and over again. So we have to repeat these to show you that it's repeatable. I don't want anyone saying that I'm making this stuff up. So let's go ahead and do it again. First, we'll reproduce the first one, which was Kurast Bazaar, or the second one, sorry, Kurast Bazaar and Lower Kurast, which was the small crescent and the maiden spear, and then we're going to reproduce the Spider Forest one. And we're going to get the bramble mitts and the lance. So again, same thing, both times, right? Now, it definitely seems like the chunks load in, and as the chunks load in, there seems to be a variable there in like loading the chunks. Time doesn't seem to be a variable because you can wait as long as you want to by the waypoint. So like for instance, if I just go straight to the waypoint here, it should be a small charm. I can wait here. I can run around in circles here. I can do whatever I want to. It doesn't seem to be steps. It doesn't seem to be time. It doesn't seem to be any of those variables. It seems to be loading in the chunks, and you'll see that I still get the small charm every single time. And if I do this repeatedly and I change the variables ever so slightly, I can determine what works and what doesn't work. You guys can do this too. And one of the questions I've gotten a lot with this is I've gotten a question of, well, okay, you can change the variables. All right. Does this work online? As of right now, we're doing all the testing offline. And I talked about this yesterday, which is... Where did I not write this down? I'm pretty sure I wrote this down. So, online mode. And this will help a lot of you guys for offline for your online mode, as well as some of you guys for your offline mode too. So in online mode, the goal of this is to first off, in offline mode, we have to do this testing in offline mode. We need to learn all the variables, and we need to understand the system. And this requires us to set the seed code so that we can do the testing. You need a system where you can input-output, which means that I do this thing and I find out what that thing does as a result, and then you can start writing down and recording all of the various variables, and you can start figuring out exactly what each variable does, right? Or, you know, or how each variable affects the outcome. And then once you know all the variables and understand the system, then you can apply that knowledge to online. And the reason why you can apply that knowledge to online is because once you understand everything, it's just a matter of putting the variables to use. Now, you cannot confirm the result upon changing a variable online, and because you cannot confirm the result upon changing a variable online, you have to know what the variables do before you use it. So you can't just you know, put in random keys and hope you get something. You have to know what the key does when you press it, essentially, almost like you're pressing keys on a keyboard. If I just smash my hand into the keyboard, you know, I'm going to end up with, you know, just a variable result, which I have no clue what it does, right? But if I know that pressing the keys B, R, U, N, G was going to write me to where brung did, then I know exactly what I'm typing. Right? So this is the important thing about online, is we have to test the variables and figure out what they do before they can ever be utilized online. Because the variables stack, time could be a variable if you have preceding variables that activates it. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, basically there's something called variable stacking. Variable stacking is where one variable precedes another, so forth and so on, until eventually you have a total number of variables, like a pyramid. It builds a pyramid, and the first one at the bottom determines the second one, and the second one determines the third, and the third one determines the fourth, and the fourth one determines the fifth, and so forth and so on, up the chain until you eventually end up at the nth variable that's at the top of the pyramid. Variable stacking is something that could be involved here, but it does seem like that limiting the number of variables prevents variable stacking from making things too random, which is why, you know, you generally want to get whatever it is that you're getting with this particular method relatively early and in the sequence. And this also leads us to that the game almost feels as if it's alive, because the game is responding to our actions and our playstyle directly. And this is pretty crazy. Now, you might be asking, like, what I'm talking about. Well, the experience changes and evolves with how the player approaches the game, and your playstyle directly affects the loot that you get from the stats on the item, which we're going to cover in just a minute, and the monsters that spawn, the items that drop from the clickables, the name of the monster, the modifiers of the monster, the loot that drops from the monsters, and even the loot that drops from the bosses. And this is all very, very interesting, and I've got even more stuff here. So we did a little bit of testing the other day during Ladder Livestream. If you want to check out the first day of Diablo 2 Resurrected Season 6, we did this testing, and we kind of like played around with how you determine the stats on an item. Now, don't confuse this with the first set of variables, because this set of variables is different than the first set of variables. So chunk loading determines what item drops, okay? So if I load the chunks in the specific order, I will always get the same item from the chest, and this is the small charm. Now, the second set of variables that I'm going to teach you now is the variables that involve the stats on the item. The stats on the item seems to be a separate set of variables, which is actually quite easy to manipulate. It's actually pretty crazy, and you might be wondering what the hell I'm talking about, but we're gonna go over it here together. So first, let me just show you, and then we're gonna go over what we've determined. So if you go to Lower Kurast, and you go back to this thing, and you click on here, and you open up the chest, and you click on your small charm, what you're going to notice is that you have a different small charm every single time, right? So first time we got a +1 strength. I managed to reproduce that +1 strength. Then I got a steel charm, and then I got a septic small charm. All right. Now, what if I told you that you could get the same exact charm over and over? Well, you can. And basically what we found out is that it is actually directly related. It's an input-output scenario to the number of items that you have in your, well, anywhere. Let me give you an example. So let's pull up my sheet here because my sheet has all this information already. So the number of total items determines the modifiers that roll on an item. Loading into different zones, clicking on chests, skeleton racks, weapon rack, armor rack, super chests, where the monster spawns, what clickables are, what drops out of the chest, etc. What drops the values on the item, and a chunk loading in the variable changes the variables, right? So we have a lot of different things going on here, but what it basically comes down to is that there's two different sets of variables. And let me actually just write this in here because I'm apparently I didn't. So you have the chunk loading determines what drops the base. Okay. Magic find determines the rarity roll, or in case of super chests, super chest determines rarity roll, which does seem to be actually random. I'm not sure what variable is determining the rarity roll, but I have been able to get the rarity roll several times in a row, and I'm not exactly sure how that is. Maybe that's another set of variables that we're going to have to determine. And then number of total items determines stats on item. And we've actually been able to confirm this by simply controlling the number of items. So as an example, the last charm that dropped was a septic small charm. The charm before that was a steel charm, okay? If I would like to get the septic small charm again, or maybe I want to get the steel charm again, let's do the steel charm. I need to drop 2 items because it was 2 items back on the variable. So we drop 2 items from our inventory. We go back here. I can then run all the way back down here. Go to Lower Kurast, click on the chest again, and the chest will drop me again a steel charm. And this can be reproduced every single time because of the number of items in our inventory. And we did a lot of testing with this on Latter Day, and basically what we determined was... Where is my dojinx at? Not this one. Okay. Here it is. So what counts toward the total? Let's write this in here. So what counts toward the total? Question mark. The answers to this question is what is in your stash actually determines the modifiers on the items. Yes. Your shared stash, yes. Your inventory, yes. Your Herodric cube, yes. Items on the ground, yes. Item on the ground in other zones, yes. We tested all of this. Now, interestingly enough, when we tested this again later, it seemed to have varying results. For instance, potions on the ground, it didn't seem to have an effect, but items on the ground did. items in town seem to count as well. Does rarity of items stored matter? No. So it doesn't matter if it's a magic or a rare item. It doesn't matter what type of item it is. So for instance, if you have a, like a rare harpoon as opposed to a magic harpoon, or you have a kite shield instead, none of that seems to change the variables. We've actually tested this pretty extensively. You can even take items off of your character, and you can actually put those in your stash as well, and it doesn't have any effect. Your mercenaries inventory also affects the number, the total. Belt potions also seem to affect the total. The size of the item doesn't seem to affect. We tried like shifting between a 4 size and a 6 size item, and that didn't seem to have any effect. Does your weapon swap affect it? Yes, we found out having items in your weapon swap adds to the total, and that also counts. Do your summons determine drops? Yes. We actually summoned a spirit wolf from my crescent moon, and it changed the value, but we couldn't figure out what the value was. It is unknown. It is not 1. Like all the other things. So the individual items that you have in your inventory seem to be a value of 1, whereas the summons do not seem to be a value of 1, and we couldn't figure out what they were. We went as far as +7 and as low as -7, and we could not reproduce the value that the summon wolf has on the effects, which led us to believe that maybe the summon wolf is a multiplier or divider, which could be dividing the total or multiplying the total based by an interesting amount of information. This requires more testing, unfortunately. Player count adds a value of 1. When you change from 7 to 8, it just simply adds 1 to the value of determining the stats on the item. However, we did actually test the super chests, and we found that the drops completely changed between 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8. And what do I mean by completely changed? Well, right now I'm on player count 4, and if I change to player count 3, it doesn't completely change the drops. So if I go back in here and we do this, I should still get a small charm according to my previous testing. Now, the testing does need to be done again and again and again to make sure that the variables aren't changing between games or between like time frames, or maybe like between days or anything like that, right? But we don't know that for certain yet. So we have our small charm. As you can see, we still got the small charm with the 3, right? And it's the septic small charm because we have the steel in our inventory. Stats on the steel don't matter. It's just the number, right? So we have the number, and I can prove this to you by just simply replacing the steel with the septic. And if I replace the steel with the septic, we will still get the septic because the septic doesn't matter. The steel doesn't matter. The stats on the item don't matter. The rarity of the item doesn't matter. It's just the number of the items that matter. And so basically with this, I'll get another septic charm. But that's not really what I'm trying to show you. But it's interesting nonetheless to show you this information so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now, when you change between players count 4 and 5, as well as 6 and 7, and the ones that I have listed there, when you change between these like breakpoints, I'll just call them breakpoints, it changes the drops that come out of the chest completely. Everything changes. And I don't know exactly what the player count is doing to the total, but it seems that player count affects more than what we originally had thought. A lot of people know about the traditional breakpoints for player count, 1, 3, 5, and 7, like 2, 4, 6, and 8, etc., right? A lot of people know about those, but not a lot of people are aware of this because this is something that we really have only just started testing. So basically, every single time you go up 2 points on the character tree, and you can just write this down. So 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8, the super chests and everything in them change dramatically. As you can clearly see now, I'm getting the jewels and all the other stuff that's coming from the chest instead of what we were getting before, which was the small charms. And this has to do with the, I guess, the player count itself changing the variables, changing the like almost like a base variable or something. And it's actually surprisingly interesting that you can literally determine exactly what drops on the item. Now, if you're wondering about these in particular, I actually did these on the actually did these on the ladder stream, or was yesterday. Did I do it yesterday? I was playing around with it yesterday. I'm still extremely enamored with all this and determining variables. Somebody else in the comments has told me that they actually have a low rune farm from this particular one too now. So they've been playing with the variables because that's what I was always hoping, is that you guys would also be playing with the variables and trying to figure things out. And ironically, they've also found some pretty crazy stuff. Let me see if I can find this right here. Let's go to newest first. Yes, his name is Rar Fear Me. Found a way to farm infinite low runes in the same seed. Jesus, this seed is insane. And I said, share it with me. I said, family weekend, we'll upload a video on Monday. So it looks like Rarframe's going to upload the infinite low rune trick for this particular seed. All in all, this is very interesting in that, and I was talking about this earlier with one of the other things, is that the game actually feels alive. It's actually quite interesting to consider this, that, well, where you go, if where you go matters, if what you keep in your inventory or lack thereof, what you don't keep in your inventory, the number of total items that you have in your inventory. In other words, if you're a hoarder, then you get different stuff than if you're not a hoarder. And I have to hesitate to say better, because better doesn't necessarily compute here. It has to do with the number of total items. And it directly has a result on the stats of something that falls out of the chest. And you might be asking, what the hell am I talking about? Well, like, think about it like this. Have you ever been playing along and your friend just seems to be getting really lucky? Like, oh my god, like every time you turn around, he's got a low rune, he finds an ohm rune, he finds a frickin' Griffin's Eye diadem, he finds, like a frickin' Tyrael's Might or whatever, and he just, like, it seems like no matter what happens, this boy just seems like the luckiest SOB that ever existed on the planet. And you're over here with like an L rune, a Tyr rune, and like a frickin' Steel Clash Kite Shield, and you can't figure out what you're doing wrong. Well, as it turns out, since where you go matters, since how you participate in the area matters, in other words, like if you go over here and click on the skeleton and the weapon rack first, and then you go click on the corpse, and then you go click on the chest, it changes the result, right? So how you play the game matters, including, like, are you a hoarder or are you a person who throws everything away? Like, do you keep every single item that you find? Do you throw every single item that you find away? Do you have a neatly organized stash? Do you have a messy stash with, like, items all over the place, and, like, where, like, you can't really store your equipment properly because it feels like you've got, like, a bunch of wasted space, right? Or are you the kind of person who has everything so neatly organized that you've used up every single point of inventory space that you possibly can? Do you have a mercenary? Do you not have a mercenary? Even something as simple as having your mercenary can change the result of what the item actually rolls with. And so what I am getting at here is that the game basically is almost responding to you as if you're alive, as if it's alive. Because your playstyle is directly affecting the loot that you get, the stats on the item, the monsters that spawn, the items that drop from clickables, the name of the monster, the modifiers that the monster spawns with, the loot that the monster drops, the loot that the bosses drops, like literally the entire game is decided by how you approach it, right? So how you approach the game changes things dramatically. And it's almost as if the game is alive because you're alive, right? And maybe this is actually the secret. Maybe this is actually why Diablo 2 has been so successful for so long and has maintained interest in so many people, because even as we grow as people, we change the result, right? So, like, you're not the same person you were when you were like 15 years old. You're not playing the same way that you were when you were 15 years old, right? So the results are changing. And I think that's also why I think a lot of people remember when like they originally introduced Diablo 2 Resurrected, and like we kind of felt like drops were a little bit better than they were normally. And well, shared stash is also part of this. Apparently, shared stash also messes with the RNG calculation, and so we've added more items to the total essentially, right? And you can hoard more equipment now. You can you can hoard more things, and because you can hoard more things, it's changed the result. So even if you play exactly the same, when they added the shared stash tabs, it actually made it so that the items that were dropping were slightly different than they were before. I hope you all find this as ridiculously fascinating as I do. I really do. I hope you all find this just like morbidly fascinating, because I've had so much fun just playing around with this. As you can see, I haven't used any of my 52 burr runes, or what, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 51, 52, 54. So 54 burr runes. I haven't used any of my 54 burr runes. And if I want to go back and I want to get those 55 burr runes, I can always switch it back to player 7. And then I can just go do another farm and find it again. It's really not that difficult. I can up transmute those burr runes into what? Jaws, Chams, Zods, and basically have infinite Zods, Chams, and Zods. And Jaw, yeah. Mm-hmm. So Travincal, Lower Kurast, Teleport, Skeleton, Corpse, Armor Stand, Stash, Weapon Rack. Oh, Balanced Knife that time. That's different. The balanced knife isn't that's not the normal thing that drops out of that chest. I wonder if I've changed some of the variables. Well, we still got the burr rune with the balanced knife, so I guess we're still on track. Some people have also been reporting to me that they've been able to reproduce this without my steps by doing their own steps. And I promised to talk about console players. So console players, I know you can't put in the seed code, okay? And I've gotten about 10 trillion, quadrillion, gazillion, million, trillion, billion, billion, alien comments about does it work on console? And the answer is yes, it does work on console. It just doesn't work on console with this exact seed. Because you can't put in my seed code, you're going to have your own seed code. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to Lower Kurast and you're going to have to change the variables yourself. It would help if you record yourself doing it. And then what you do is as soon as you get a good rune, something like a, like a low rune or a ohm rune or a vex or a gull or a cham or a zod or whatever it is that you get, you go back on the tapes and you basically look at how you did it, and then you reproduce the variables. You can do this on any version of the game, even on consoles, but you have to be willing to spend a little bit of time to make your own farm, essentially, to put in the work yourself instead of just simply copying my homework, as the teacher would say. And if you're willing to put in the work yourself, you can pretty much do all of this as well, including manipulating the stats on a small charm. I can sit here, and just as an example, let's actually do this real quick and manipulate the stats on the small charm until I get something that I'm interested in. Right? So how do we manipulate the stats on the small charm? Well, first off, let's go ahead and empty our belt, because your potions in your belt actually do affect this. We don't need any potions for this anyway, because we're just going to be teleporting directly to the chest. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we've got enough keys, because we don't want to run out of keys while we're doing this process. Let's go ahead and get a full stack of keys. Let's go ahead and throw that one away too. Doesn't matter. We're going to get 2 stacks of keys here. And we're going to do a little bit of manipulation of the stats that roll on the small charm. Now, for this reason, I'm going to take some of my items and put them in the stash. Now, remember that I have already discussed this, is that the items that are in your stash or your cube or wherever they are, it doesn't seem to matter where they are. It only seems to matter that they're in your stash. If I take off my gloves, for instance, and put them in the stash, it still counts as an item. If I take off my alternate weapon swap and put that in the stash and then swap back to my other weapon swap, it still seems to count. Another interesting thing that we tested, which I forgot to go over, by the way, is that the runes inside of an item still count. So we actually tested this with a Spirit Rondash. What we did was we started putting the runes into the Spirit Rondash and checking the item that dropped over and over again. And as we put the runes in the Spirit Rondash, all of the runes still counted toward the total. And on top of this, the last rune that created the rune word still counted toward the total, and all of the runes inside the item still counted toward the total. So when you have 4 runes in an item, those 4 runes are counting as another total for the thing. So you have the 1 for the base and the 1, 2, 3, 4 for the runes in the base, which means that this item is now counting as 5, as opposed to this item, which is only counting as 1 with 4 empty sockets. All right, so variable testing. Let's go. So how do we test variables, and how do we determine the drops and what we get, and then when we get something, how do we reproduce it? Let's go over the lessons real quick. So first off, we need to make sure that we're getting the small charm, which we're currently on P7. So we do need to change this to P4 at this particular moment, because P4 will get us the small charm, which is what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and grab the small charm. Now the first step is just simply to find out what the small charm drops with. What stats does the small charm drop with my current variables, with my belt being empty, and, you know, like with me dropping all of the excess charms that I had currently picked up? What's my current variable? And my current variable is a 5% faster hit recovery small charm. So if I do this over and over again, I can get a 5% faster hit recovery small charm every single time. Now, if I save and exit and I do this again, now keep in mind I've picked up the 5% faster hit recovery small charm, which has added 1 to the total. Now, this is the easiest way to do it. Just pick up the charm. This adds 1 to the total, and every single time you add 1 to the total, you are now going to change the result. And so now we're going to pick up the small charm, and the small charm is not going to be the 5% faster hit recovery. It's going to be the next in the loot table, which is a +1 strength charm. We're going to hang on to that +1 strength charm, and we're going to do this over and over again until we get something decent, something that we're actually interested in hanging on to. And let's just keep rolling this, you know, repeatedly. We're going to throw these in the cube for now. It doesn't matter if they're in the cube. As I talked about earlier, the cube seems to count same as your inventory. So we're going to pick up the next small charm, and the next small charm is the 7% magic find, 9% lightning resistant charm. So we have now identified the position of the charm, which is our current offset +2. So our current offset +2. And what we can do is we can take one of these crappy charms, because it doesn't matter what the item is, it only matters that we have 2 items. So we're going to take that crappy charm and replace it with the 7% magic find, 9% lightning res small charm. Then we're going to save and exit, and we're going to do it again. Now, because the offset is the same, we're going to be able to reproduce this repeatedly. So we're going to be able to get this 7% magic find, 9% lightning res small charm over and over and over again, without fail, mind you. So we go back to Lower Kurast, we teleport back over here, we open up the chest, we get the small charm. The small charm is going to be a 9% lightning, 7% magic find. Now, if we keep this and we don't throw away this charm, it'll change the result. So if we go back in here and we grab the third charm, we now have 3 items in our inventory excess over normal, then 2 items in our inventory excess over normal, which basically means that we've now changed the result to the preceding entry, or sorry, the entry after the really nice charm that we just identified, right? But maybe we don't want that charm. Maybe we want something else. But notice that now we've gone from a 7% magic find, 9% lightning resistance charm to an 8 max stamina, which is pretty garbage, right? But we want to go back, so we need to take our count and bring it back down. So we need to go back to 2+, and then we're going to save and exit, and we're going to continue this way. So we're going to go back to hell. We're going to go back over here, and we're going to proceed to receive the same Annie, the same small charm over and over and over again. All right, so bam, we got this small charm. And as you can see, I can repeat this all day long. Now, we're in a pickle here, though, because now I don't have anything to throw away, right? So I could go through my charms, and I could see if I could find a lightning res charm to maybe throw away or something. But basically, I have to throw something away. I could throw a stack of keys away, so I could do that. We could throw the stack of keys away, and that would also work. Because if I don't keep the number of items in my inventory the same, it won't work. And these variables are eminently testable. You can play around with these variables and test all day long. I would recommend that maybe somebody, I'm probably going to do it myself too, but if you guys want to test these summoning variables, the summoning variables seem very strange, and I'm not exactly sure how to explain the summoning variables. I think that's pretty much it for today. I don't want to make these videos too ridiculously long, but do make sure that you hit the like button and comment. I'm very interested to hear if you guys are interested in more of this, me uncovering more dirty secrets from within the random number generator, essentially. I'm trying to keep things as concise as I can. Like, some of the testing that I've been doing will take me like hours to finish, and I know that this video is 35 minutes, but hours of testing is hard to condense down into minutes of videos, especially if I'm going to prove to you that this stuff works by reproducing the variables. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when I'm just uncovering the secrets of Diablo 2. And as always, keep watching.